The diamond ring hit the marble floor just as the mansion doors burst open. Let her leave. The command came from the billionaire himself. For 3 years, Alexander Blackwood had never raised his voice in his own home. His employees feared his silence more than his anger. His business rivals feared his name. Yet now, standing barefoot at the top of the grand staircase, his face drained of color, he looked less like the most powerful man in Chicago and more like a man watching his entire life collapse. Clara Bennett froze beside the dining room table. She was still wearing the simple black dress she had been hired to wear as a housekeeper. But the diamond ring lying at her feet belonged to her, and Alexander had just accused her of stealing it. Before the guards could reach her, Clara bent down and picked it up. Her fingers trembled, not because she was afraid of being arrested, because she recognized the engraving inside the ring. A tiny letter be the same letter her mother had drawn on the back of an old photograph every night before she died. Clara looked at Alexander. "Where did you get this?" His expression changed. For one terrifying second, neither of them spoke. Then Alexander whispered, "You were never supposed to see that." That was the moment Clara realized the wealthy man who had employed her for 6 months knew something about her family, something he had been hiding. Before the story goes any further, take a moment to subscribe, like the video, and comment where you're watching from. Because what Clara was about to discover would prove that sometimes the person standing closest to a secret is the very person everyone is trying to protect from it. Clara had entered Alexander Blackwood's mansion 6 months earlier with one goal: to earn enough money to pay her mother's remaining medical debts. Her mother had died believing Clara would eventually have a better life. Instead, Clara had inherited unpaid bills, a tiny apartment with a leaking ceiling, and a stubborn determination not to accept pity from anyone. She had never dreamed of meeting a billionaire. And she certainly had never imagined becoming his wife. Yet 3 months after hearing her, Alexander had made an extraordinary offer, a marriage contract. 2 years, a generous payment, no romance, no questions, no interference in each other's private lives. It sounded ridiculous, but Clara needed money. Alexander needed a wife, so she had signed. What she didn't know was that Alexander hadn't chosen her because she was poor. He had chosen her because she looked exactly like someone he had spent 25 years trying to forget. Now, as Clara stood beneath the enormous chandelier with the engraved ring in her hand, she finally understood that the marriage had never been a business arrangement. It had been a trap. "Answer me," Alexander said quietly. "Where did you find it?" "In your father's study." His jaw tightened. "You went into that room. The house manager told me to clean it." "No one cleans that room." Stared at him. "Then why was the door unlocked?" Alexander didn't answer. That silence frightened her more than an accusation would have. His mother, Alexander Blackwood, appeared at the top of the stairs. She was an elegant woman in her late 60s, always perfectly dressed, always composed. But when she saw the ring in Clara's hand, the color disappeared from her face. "Alexander," she whispered. He turned. "Mother, go upstairs." Alexander didn't move. Her eyes remained fixed on Clara, then she said something that made Clara's blood run cold. "She has his eyes." Alexander's expression hardened. "Mother." Alexander was already walking toward Clara, slowly, almost cautiously. When she reached the bottom of the staircase, she looked directly into Clara's face. "Old are you?" Clara frowned. 28. Alexander's hand began to tremble. 28. Alexander stepped between them. "Enough." Clara noticed something. The old woman wasn't looking at her like an employee. She was looking at her like a ghost. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. The mansion was silent, but something about the house had changed. She kept thinking about the ring, the letter be her mother's photograph, and Alexander's strange reaction. At 2 in the morning, Clara heard footsteps outside her bedroom. She sat upright. The footsteps stopped. Then someone whispered through the door. "Clara." She recognized Alexander's voice. Opened it. He stood there wearing a dark shirt, his face unusually tired. "Come with me." "Where?" "My father's study." Clara hesitated. "You said I wasn't allowed there." "I changed my mind." Turned and walked away. Clara followed. But when they reached the study, Alexander stopped before opening the door. "If you find anything in there," he said, "you give it to me." "What are you afraid I'll find?" He looked at her for several seconds. "You." Door opened. Inside, the room smelled of old books and polished wood. Alexander crossed to a large desk and unlocked the bottom drawer. He removed a faded photograph. Then he handed it to Clara, her breath caught. The photograph showed a young woman standing beside Alexander's father. The woman was smiling. She looked exactly like Clara, not similar, exactly. Clara stared at the photograph, unable to breathe. "That isn't possible." Alexander said nothing. "That woman is my mother." I know. Clara slowly looked up. You knew. Alexander's eyes filled with something she had never seen in them before, regret. I knew before you ever walked through my front door. Stepped backward. You hired me because of her. No. Then why? Alexander hesitated. And before he could answer, a sound came from behind the study door, a soft click. They both turned. Someone had locked them inside. Then the lights went out. In the darkness, Clara heard Alexander inhale sharply. And somewhere beneath the floor, a hidden machine began to move. A section of the wall slowly opened. Inside was a narrow staircase leading underground. Alexander stared at it. That passage was sealed 25 years ago. Clara's voice shook. Then who just opened it? Neither of them moved until a woman's voice came through the darkness. Because your father didn't die in that fire, Alexander. And then she said the one thing that changed everything. He has been waiting for his daughter to come home. He has been waiting for his daughter to come home. Couldn't move. The words seemed to echo through the dark room long after Alina stopped speaking. Alexander reached for the emergency light on his phone, but before he could turn it on, Clara grabbed his arm. Your father is alive. Alina's voice came from the other side of the locked door. Alexander stared at the hidden staircase. No, his voice was barely audible. Father died 25 years ago. That is what he wanted everyone to believe. Lock suddenly clicked. The study door swung open. Alina stood there holding an old brass key. Her eyes were wet. I kept this secret because your father made me swear to protect you. Alexander stepped toward her. Protect me from what? From the truth. Alina looked at Clara. And now the truth has found you anyway. They descended the narrow staircase together. At the bottom was a small underground room filled with old documents, photographs, newspaper clippings, and boxes. Clara stopped when she saw a photograph on the wall. Her mother stood beside Alexander's father. They were young, they were smiling. And between them was a little girl, Clara. Her heart seemed to stop. She touched the photograph with trembling fingers. I don't remember this. You were 3, Alina said. Clara turned. Why did my mother never tell me? Because she believed she was protecting you. Walked toward a desk. On it sat dozens of unopened letters, all addressed to Clara. Every envelope carried the same handwriting, her father's handwriting. Clara's eyes filled with tears. He wrote to me. Every year, Alina answered. Then why didn't I receive them? Alina lowered her head. Because I couldn't let him find you. Looked at his mother. You knew where she was all these years. Yes. You brought her into this house. I didn't. Clara slowly looked at Alexander. He understood before she did. You did. Alexander's face hardened. Yes. Stepped away from him. You knew who I was when you hired me. Yes. You knew my mother was his daughter. Yes. You knew my father was alive. Alexander couldn't answer. That silence broke something inside her. You lied to me. I was trying to protect you. No, Clara's voice cracked. You were trying to control me. Stepped closer. I married you because I knew someone was looking for you. You thought marrying me would keep me safe. I thought keeping you close would. Never trusted me enough to tell me the truth. I didn't trust anyone. Laughed bitterly through her tears. And somehow you expected me to trust you. Alexander looked devastated. I fell in love with you. The room went silent. Clara stared at him. He swallowed. That wasn't part of the contract. She looked away. I tried to keep it separate. I tried to convince myself you were only someone I needed to protect. His voice weakened. But somewhere between watching you fall asleep at the kitchen table, listening to you laugh when you thought nobody was around, and seeing you fight for everyone except yourself, he stopped. I stopped caring about the contract. Clara's eyes filled again. And you still lied. Yes. Didn't defend himself. That somehow hurt more. Then a gunshot exploded above them. Alina screamed. Alexander immediately pulled Clara behind him. Another shot struck the wooden staircase. We have to go, he said. Who is that? Someone who knows about this room. They ran toward a second passageway, but before they reached it, a man's voice echoed through the underground chamber. Alexander. Everyone froze. A figure appeared at the top of the stairs, an older man, gray hair, a scar across his cheek. A familiar pair of blue eyes. Alexander stared at him. His lips parted. Dad, the man looked at Clara, and for the first time in 25 years, he smiled. Daughter. Couldn't breathe. She had imagined meeting her father 1,000 times, never like this, never while men with guns were searching the mansion, never after discovering that nearly everything she believed about her life had been a lie. She stepped toward him. Why? Her father looked ashamed. Because I was a coward. Shook her head. No, that isn't enough. Nodded. You deserve the truth. He explained everything. 25 years earlier, he had discovered that his business partner was stealing millions from the Blackwood company. When he threatened to expose him, the man arranged an accident and set fire to the family estate. Everyone believed he had died. But he survived. He disappeared because the men responsible threatened to kill his wife and daughter. Clara's mother took Clara and ran. Her father stayed hidden. But the threat never disappeared. And now someone had discovered that he was alive. Alexander asked. His father looked toward Alina, then toward the doorway. Your uncle. Alexander went still. Uncle died years ago. No, his father said. He didn't. A slow clap echoed from the corridor. Everyone turned. Alexander's uncle stepped from the shadows. He was holding a gun. I always wondered when the family would finally stop lying to itself. Alexander moved in front of Clara. His uncle smiled. You have your father's weakness, Alexander. You always protect the wrong people. You killed my father. No, the man looked at Clara. He survived because I wanted him to suffer. He raised the gun. And now I want what belongs to me. Alexander lunged. The gun fired. Clara screamed. But Alexander wasn't the one who fell. Alina stood between them. She had been shot. Mother. Alexander caught her as she collapsed. His uncle ran. Alexander's father chased him through the passage. Clara dropped beside Alina. Stay with me. Alina smiled weakly. I should have told you the truth years ago. Held her hand. Why didn't you? Because sometimes love makes cowards of people. Then police sirens filled the night. Alexander's father had reached the emergency exit and alerted the authorities. His uncle was arrested before he could escape the estate. But the greatest battle wasn't over. It was the one happening inside Clara. For years, she had believed she was unwanted. She had believed poverty meant she had been forgotten. She had believed her mother's silence meant shame. Now she has discovered something completely different. She had been loved so fiercely that 3 generations of people had spent decades trying to keep her alive. Weeks later, Alina survived. Alexander ended the marriage contract, not because he no longer wanted Clara, because for the first time he wanted her to choose him freely. He placed the original contract on the table and pushed it toward her. More agreements, he said. Clara looked at him. If I don't choose you, his eyes filled with sadness. Then I'll spend the rest of my life being grateful that you were safe. She stared at him for a long moment, then she tore the contract in half. Alexander's breath caught. Clara smiled through her tears. I don't want the contract. She stepped closer. I do want the man who finally learned that love isn't protection without trust. Pulled her into his arms. For the first time, there were no secrets between them, no conditions, no lies. Only 2 people who had survived a lifetime of things they never should have had to endure. Months later, Clara stood in the garden of the Blackwood estate beside her father, watching Alexander speak with Alina. She looked down at the old ring, the same ring that had started everything. Her father's initials were still engraved inside. But beneath them, Alexander had added something new, a single sentence, not a promise of wealth. Not a claim of ownership, just 4 words. Choose me every day. Smiled. She finally understood something her mother had tried to teach her years ago. Sometimes the greatest inheritance isn't money. It is the truth. And sometimes the person who enters your life disguised as a stranger is the person who is always meant to lead you home. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel. Share it with someone who loves emotional stories filled with suspense and unexpected twists, and comment on the biggest lesson this story taught. Was it forgiveness, trust, family, or the courage to choose love after betrayal? Because Clara learned that night that wealth can buy a mansion, influence can open almost every door, and secrets can protect a family for decades. But none of them can replace the one thing every human heart eventually needs: the freedom to know the truth and the courage to love after knowing it.